Can you read Hebrew? Absolutely, I can read
she's
Hebrew.
talking to you. Yeah, I think she's
Yeah,
talking
she asked
to
me
you.
the question. I can read Hebrew.
I wish I could fully read what they wrote here, and unfortunately, no one's ever has been able to decipher exactly what they say.
Listen,
You
did you
don't
hear
think
what
the
I
whole
said?
Pew thing was left up in the air?
Huh?
You don't think the whole...
Pastor Kelly Richardson posted a video on his We Woke Now account titled, quote, "Nothing to prove, no more talk," end quote, in which he seemed to clearly close the door to further discussion on the topic of the pews at FirstAfricanBaptistChurch in Savannah, Georgia.
Leave these guys alone. After today, this discussion is dead with them. Because even what Vocab is getting ready to do tomorrow, right? He's going to do a video by saying that the writings on the pews, right, in Savannah is not Hebrew. That is Arabic. But I encourage you to go back and look at the video that I did, Identity Theft, and I give you some information to completely debunk what he's talking about.
First, a quick note is in order here. Vocab does not claim that the markings on the pews are Arabic. Pastor Richardson might have in mind a methodological thought experiment I presented, which I'll touch on in a bit. If so, that was merely to show what a proper approach to demonstrating discernible language on the pews might look like. Pastor Richardson, with all due respect to him, did not, quote, completely debunk, end quote, that thought experiment, that argument. With all due respect to him, it seems he didn't even understand the thought experiment, much less adequately address it. His attempted debunking was him noting that a website for the church, which Vocab has also mentioned, now claims the markings are Arabic, but the church used to claim that the markings were Hebrew. With that change in mind, Pastor Richardson has attempted to impugn the motivations of the people responsible. What Pastor Richardson has never done, however, is present a video which actually gets into the markings on the pews and show the alleged language therein. And that's curious, to put it mildly.
But what he wanted to do about the pews, he could care less what's on the pews. Whether, and truth be told, if it's Arabic, I don't have a problem with this Arabic, if it's Arabic, but I know it's not Arabic.
Honestly, I would love to hear more on how Pastor Richardson knows that Arabic does not appear on the pews. With all due respect, I do not believe he has a coherent methodology for determining what language might be on the pews, assuming there's any language there at all, as his actual methodology boils down to simply noting that certain markings resemble certain individual Hebrew or Ge'ez characters without being able to discern a single coherent word, which we'll touch on in a moment. For now, it's sufficient to say that if Pastor Richardson cannot identify a single word, then he's in no position to declare that the alleged language therein is Hebrew and not Arabic. To think that this could be determined by some vague resemblance to individual characters is to confuse language with script. For example, here are 3 sentences, all written in the same script, the Hebrew cursive script. This first sentence is Hebrew. This second sentence, however, is Arabic. It is written in Hebrew cursive characters, but it is Arabic. Then this third sentence is Yiddish. That third sentence is not written in a Semitic language. This is relevant to Pastor Richardson thinking that a marking that resembles a character somehow establishes the presence of a Semitic language. As for the Ge'ez script, here's a quick analogy. This is from the website amharicquran.com. This sentence right here is Amharic. However, this sentence, on the other hand, is Arabic. It's written in the Ge'ez script, but it is Arabic. Therefore, assuming for the sake of hypothetical argument that there is coherent language in the pews, Pastor Richardson's reasoning that the text cannot be Arabic because some of the markings vaguely resemble Hebrew or Ge'ez characters it's a bad argument. And by the way, as was shown in my video on the church's sanctuary, all sorts of things can resemble Hebrew or Ge'ez characters, including markings in which neither Hebrew nor Ge'ez nor any other Semitic language is actually present. The point of that thought experiment was to show that Kelly Richardson's methodology can easily produce false positives.
So what they're going to try to do, what he's going to try to do, he's going to play the guy Abu, right? Who even makes it clear that he can't even read what's on the pew.
Pastor Richardson seems to think it's a knock against me if I cannot read what's on the pews. However, my position has always been that there is no discernible language on those pews, thus no one can read them. Ironically, Pastor Richardson himself has conceded multiple times that no one has been able to read the markings on those pews.
I wish I could fully read what they wrote here, and unfortunately, no one's ever has been able to decipher exactly what they say.
Here are some clips of Vocab Malone reading old Facebook posts from Kelly Richardson in which he noted that no one could read those markings, not even Hebrew scholars.
By the way, this is a Kelly Richardson post from 2017. Eliezer ben Yehuda, the father of modern Hebrew, in which he began to create in 1881. According to history, the Hebrew language was lost. Yet in Savannah, Georgia, there is a church that was built over a century prior to this new creation of modern Hebrew. This entire church was built in 1773 by the hands of Negro slaves. These slaves also built the pews in which they are still in the sanctuary this very day, in which these Negro slaves wrote in a cursive Hebrew comparable to the 2nd century BC. What's amazing, not one Hebrew scholar can translate the writing. I'm sorry. Including your own, buddy? I mean, come on. And let me read his comment real quick. Have that Hebrew scholar make a personal visit to the church I mentioned and translate what our ancestors wrote on their pews. And then I'll believe him. He'll be the first to accomplish what no one else has been able to do up to date. I'm sorry. This is so ironic. Go ahead, bro. Oh, my goodness. Tyler Supercall Holmes says, is it true nobody can read that Hebrew the slaves wrote? That's correct.
That's correct.
Break it down, the insane irony. Again, I feel like we shouldn't have to repeat this, but can you break it down, my man?
And in case it isn't already obvious, you know who else can't read the markings on those pews? Kelly Richardson himself cannot read the markings on those pews.
And that's what I think somebody asked that question of, does he know what's on the pews? And I think you did say at the beginning that you know what's some of the words that are on the pews.
Well, I can identify some of the letters, put it that way. I'm not going to say I know the words. I can identify some of the letters.
So if Kelly Richardson can't read the markings on the pews, what makes him think that he's making a significant point about me not seeing any discernible language on those pews? Ironically, in his recent appearance on the Brother Berean show, Pastor Richardson said that he is able to read Hebrew, yet he still cannot read the markings on those pews. Vocab Malone, sensing the irony there, subsequently tried to point out to him that maybe the problem then is that there might not be any actual Hebrew on those pews.
This sister right here, Pastor Kelly, Sister Stephanie was around for a minute. She was around when all of this stuff jumped off. Can you answer this question for her here?
Can you read Hebrew? Absolutely, I can read Hebrew.
Talking to you, yeah. I think
she asked me the question. I can read Hebrew, but what I said was I cannot read what's on the pews. I made it clear that I can't read what's on the pews.
If you can read Hebrew and the pews are in Hebrew, by a logical consequence, you should be able to read the Hebrew on the pews, if it's Hebrew.
We have long maintained that there is no discernible language on those pews. The fact that Kelly Richardson himself admits that no one can read the markings on those pews might best be explained by those markings lacking any discernible language. And this takes us to this next portion in which Pastor Richardson continues to refer to me.
He made an assumption off of what? 2 letters.
Here, Pastor Richardson was referring to that aforementioned thought experiment in which I presented a hypothetical case for Arabic, but I did not merely propose 2 letters. Rather, I proposed 2 Arabic words, Ilahin Nas, a phrase meaning God of mankind. It's actually a verse from the last chapter of the Quran, and it's not merely 2 characters, rather the relevant phrase spans 8 characters, Alif Lam Ha, Alif Lam Nun Alif Sin. Now, as I've repeatedly said, while that thought experiment was merely meant to make a methodological point, showing what an attempt to demonstrate the presence of language in the markings should look like, it still presented, ironically, a stronger case for Arabic than has ever been presented for Hebrew. I challenge Kelly Richardson or anyone else who disagrees with me to try to produce a comparable result for Hebrew. Show me markings on those pews resembling at least 8 consecutive characters, giving rise to at least 2 words forming a coherent Hebrew phrase. If you can't do that, then you should concede that even a hypothetical case for Arabic, a mere thought experiment, is still stronger than any case that could be made for Hebrew appearing in those pews. And remember, it is Kelly Richardson himself who has never been able to identify a single word in the text. Rather, his case hinges merely on certain markings resembling individual isolated characters.
Now, I'm not saying that I can read what's on the pews, but I can identify some of those letters.
That said, let's close this with Kelly Richardson making clear that he intends to close the door to any further discussion on this subject.
Let Vocab do what he's going to do. Let the urban apologetic community do what they're going to do. From now on, I'm not engaging in any of that nonsense. Because again, we don't need them to confirm who we are.
I actually agree with Pastor Richardson that he does not need us to confirm who he may or may not be, but this was never about his identity. Rather, he made claims about language appearing in those pews, and when we tried to engage him on the subject, he never addressed our methodological concerns, and he never put up a video which actually got into the work of examining the markings on those pews. He speculated about people's motivations, and he even threatened litigation, but he never discussed the actual markings on the pews. Moving forward from here, he doesn't have to take part in any discussions on the subject. He's free to abstain from any such discussions. But he should understand if those of us who have considered the subject are unwilling to simply take on faith the claim that Hebrew appears on those pews.
You don't think the whole pew thing was left up in the air?
Huh?
You don't think the whole pew